"You're too poor to be here." They mocked the nurse until she revealed the baby's secret. This is the reality of Nurse Sarah, whose dedication to her work was overshadowed by the cruelty of her colleagues. They humiliated her for her financial situation, without imagining that a child she cared for in the neonatal ICU would change her life forever. Sarah wiped down the NICU station for the third time that morning, her worn scrubs hanging loose on her thin frame. The fabric was faded from too many washes, the hospital logo barely visible anymore. Her sneakers squeaked against the polished floor, the sole on the right one coming apart at the seam. She had tried to glue it back together last night, but it was already separating again. It was 6:47 a.m. at Manhattan Presbyterian Hospital, and the morning shift was just beginning. Sarah had been working double shifts for the past 3 weeks, taking every extra hour they would give her. The bags under her eyes told the story of countless sleepless nights. But she never complained. She couldn't afford to. "Sarah, can you handle bed 7? Nurse practitioner Jennifer called from across the unit. Jennifer was everything Sarah wasn't. Polished, confident, with designer scrubs that actually fit properly, and shoes that looked like they cost more than Sarah's entire monthly rent. "Of course," Sarah said quietly, gathering the necessary supplies. As she approached bed 7, she heard the whispers. There were always whispers when she walked by. Sarah had learned to tune them out, but today they seemed louder than usual. "Did you see her shoes?" One of the younger nurses giggled. "They're literally falling apart." "I heard she lives in a studio in the Bronx," another added. "Can you imagine? How did she even get hired here?" Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she checked the IV line on the tiny infant in bed 7. Baby Emma, born at 28 weeks, fighting for every breath. Sarah knew that fight. She understood it in a way these other nurses never could. Dr. Marcus Wellington strode into the NICU like he owned the place. In many ways, he did. Chief of neonatology, published researcher, and most importantly, son of the hospital's largest donor. His white coat was crisp and pristine, his name embroidered in elegant script. Everything about him screamed privilege and power. "Nurse," he said without looking at Sarah's name tag. "Why is this infant's feeding schedule off by 30 minutes? Sarah looked up, her dark eyes meeting his cold blue ones. "Dr. Wellington, baby Emma had bradycardia during her last feeding. I delayed it per protocol to allow her heart rate to stabilize." "I don't remember asking for your medical opinion," he snapped. "You're a nurse, not a doctor. Follow the schedule I set." Jennifer appeared at Dr. Wellington's side, her smile bright and eager. "Dr. Wellington, I can take over here if you'd like. Sarah sometimes gets confused about protocols." "I followed exact protocol," Sarah said softly but firmly. "The bradycardia episode is documented in her chart." Dr. Wellington's jaw tightened. "Are you arguing with me?" "I'm explaining my clinical decision, which was correct." The tension in the NICU was palpable. Other nurses had stopped what they were doing, watching the confrontation unfold. Some looked away uncomfortably. Others seemed to be enjoying the show. "Sarah," Jennifer interjected with false sweetness, "maybe you should go check on the storage room. I think we're low on supplies." It was a dismissal, and everyone knew it. Sarah nodded, not because she agreed, but because she had learned that picking battles in a place like this was a survival skill. She walked away with as much dignity as she could muster, her broken shoe squeaking with each step. In the supply room, Sarah allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to feel the sting of humiliation. Then she wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders, and got back to work. She had rent to pay, bills stacking up, and most importantly, She had a secret that nobody in this hospital knew about. A secret that would change everything. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of tasks and subtle slights. When Sarah sat down for her 15-minute break, she found the break room suddenly empty. The other nurses had left their half-finished coffees on the table, clearly having moved their conversation elsewhere when she entered. She pulled out her phone and looked at the photo she kept as her wallpaper. A tiny face, perfect and peaceful, with wisps of dark hair and impossibly small fingers. Her chest tightened with longing and determination. "Talking to your imaginary friends?" Jennifer's voice cut through the silence. She had come back to retrieve her designer handbag. "That's so sad." Sarah didn't respond. She had learned that silence was often the best defense. "You know," Jennifer continued, leaning against the doorframe, "we all wonder why you're even here. Manhattan Presbyterian is for the best of the best. We have standards. And honestly, looking at you," she gestured vaguely at Sarah's appearance, "you just don't fit." "I'm here because I'm a good nurse," Sarah said quietly. "Are you, though?" Jennifer laughed. "You're barely keeping your head above water. Those shoes, those scrubs, the way you take every extra shift like you're desperate. It's pathetic, really. You're too poor to be here, Sarah. You should be at some community hospital in the Bronx, not here with actual professionals." The words hit their mark, but Sarah kept her face neutral. She had heard worse. She had survived worse. "Dr. Wellington thinks you're incompetent," Jennifer added, delivering what she clearly thought was the killing blow. "He's been documenting every little mistake you make, building a case. You'll be gone within a month." Sarah's phone buzzed in her hand, a text message from a number she had been waiting to hear from. Her heart raced as she read it. "Test results are in. You need to come to the office today. It's important." "I have to go," Sarah said, standing up. "Running away." Jennifer smirked. "That's what people like you do, isn't it? When things get hard, you just run." Sarah walked past her without another word. She found charge nurse Patricia and requested to leave early, using a few of the sick hours she had been hoarding. "Is everything okay?" Patricia asked, genuine concern in her eyes. Patricia was one of the few people in this hospital who treated Sarah like a human being. "It will be," Sarah said, and she meant it. The subway ride to Dr. Morrison's office seemed to take forever. Sarah's mind raced with possibilities, fears, and hopes that she had been holding on to for months. When she finally sat in the small consultation room, her hands were shaking. Dr. Morrison entered with a file folder, his expression carefully neutral. He was in his 60s with kind eyes and a gentle manner that had made Sarah trust him from their first meeting. "Sarah," he said, sitting down across from her, "I want to start by saying that everything we discussed about confidentiality still stands. What we talk about here stays here." She nodded, unable to speak. "The genetic tests came back," he continued, "and I need to ask you something before we go further. Are you absolutely sure you want to know? Once we open this door, we can't close it again." "I need to know," Sarah whispered. "I've needed to know for 17 months. Dr. Morrison opened the folder and pulled out several pages of dense medical text and charts. "Sarah, when you came to me 6 months ago with your story, with the questions about your baby, I'll admit I was skeptical. The scenario you described seemed almost impossible." Sarah's heart sank. "So it's not true. He's not—" "Let me finish." Dr. Morrison held up his hand. "I was skeptical because what you were suggesting was so rare, so unlikely, that I had only read about it in medical journals. I never expected to see it in my own practice." He turned the papers around so Sarah could see them. though she knew she wouldn't understand most of the technical language. Sarah, the baby you've been caring for in the NICU, the one you were told was abandoned, the one listed as Baby Doe 2847, the genetic testing confirms with 99.9% certainty that he is your biological son. The room seemed to tilt. Sarah had suspected, had hoped, had prayed. But hearing the confirmation was like being struck by lightning. "But how?" she breathed. "They told me he died. At the clinic. They told me he was stillborn. They showed me a death certificate." "That's what we need to talk about," Dr. Morrison said grimly. "Because what happened to you isn't just a tragic mistake. It's a crime. And it's not the first time." For the next hour, Dr. Morrison explained everything he had uncovered. The clinic where Sarah had given birth 17 months ago, desperate and alone, was under investigation. They had been telling poor, vulnerable mothers that their babies had died, then selling those babies to wealthy couples who wanted to avoid the lengthy adoption process. "Your son didn't die," Dr. Morrison said. "He was sold to Marcus and Victoria Wellington for $2.5 million. Sarah's blood turned to ice. "Wellington? As in Dr. Marcus Wellington?" "His parents. The same Marcus Wellington Sr. who is the hospital's biggest donor. The same Wellington family that has a wing of this hospital, named after them." The pieces started falling into place in Sarah's mind. The baby she had been caring for. The one she felt such an inexplicable connection to. The one she found herself checking on even when he wasn't assigned to her. Baby William Wellington had been admitted to the NICU 3 weeks ago with complications from a genetic condition. A genetic condition that Sarah knew ran in her family. "The Wellingtons don't know, do they?" Sarah asked. "They believe he's legally adopted. The clinic provided them with falsified documents showing the mother had voluntarily given up her rights. But Sarah, here's the thing you need to understand. Marcus Wellington Sr. is one of the most powerful men in this city. If you come forward with this, they will destroy you." "He's my son," Sarah said, and for the first time in months, her voice was strong. "They stole my baby and told me he was dead. I mourned him. I've been mourning him for 17 months. And now you're telling me he's been alive this whole time? That I've been taking care of him without even knowing he was mine? I'm telling you that you need to be careful. You need a lawyer. You need protection. And you need to be prepared for the fight of your life." Sarah thought about the humiliation she had endured at the hospital. The way Dr. Marcus Wellington Jr. had treated her. The way Jennifer and the others had mocked her poverty. The way they had made her feel like she was worthless. They had no idea who they were dealing with. "Set up a meeting with the lawyer," Sarah said. "I'm getting my son back." Over the next 3 days, Sarah continued working at the hospital, as if nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Every time she checked on baby William, she knew she was touching her own child. Every time Dr. Wellington Jr. snapped at her, or Jennifer made a snide comment, she remembered that she held the truth that would shatter their perfect world. The lawyer, Dr. Morrison had connected her with, was named Rebecca Torres, a fierce woman in her 40s who specialized in adoption fraud and parental rights cases. "This is going to be ugly," Rebecca told Sarah during their first meeting. "The Wellingtons will claim they're the victims, too, that they didn't know. And legally, they might have a case. But you are the biological mother, and your rights were violated in the most egregious way possible." "What do I need to do?" Sarah asked. "First, we document everything. Every interaction you have with the baby. Every medical decision you make. Every way in which you demonstrate maternal knowledge and care. Second, we file with the court quietly. We want the Wellingtons served while we have maximum leverage." Which is? Rebecca smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Which is right before the hospital's annual gala, the one where Marcus Wellington Sr. is being honored as Philanthropist of the Year, the one where every important person in New York society will be watching. Sarah thought about it for exactly 5 seconds. Do it. The next week at the hospital was the hardest of Sarah's life. She had to care for her own son while pretending not to know the truth. She had to endure Dr. Wellington Jr.'s condescension, knowing that his entire world was about to implode. She had to smile through Jennifer's mockery, counting down the days until the truth would be revealed. On Thursday, baby William had a crisis. His oxygen saturation dropped suddenly, and alarms started blaring across the NICU. Sarah was the first to respond, her instincts taking over. She adjusted his positioning, increased his oxygen flow, and within seconds had stabilized him. Dr. Wellington Jr. rushed over, ready to criticize. But he had seen what happened. Even he couldn't deny that Sarah had just saved the baby's life. "Good work," he said grudgingly. "Thank you," Sarah said, her hand lingering on her son's tiny foot. She had touched him before, but now knowing the truth, every contact felt sacred. That night, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to hold him without pretending, to call him hers, to take him home. Friday arrived, the day of the hospital gala. Sarah wasn't invited, of course. The event was for donors and senior staff only. But Rebecca had arranged for Sarah to be there, dressed in a simple but elegant dress that Rebecca had helped her choose, her hair done professionally for the first time in years. "You need to look the part," Rebecca had said. "When you walk in there, they need to see you as a mother, not as their perception of a poor nurse." The gala was being held in the hospital's grand ballroom, the same ballroom that had a plaque reading Wellington Wing of Excellence above the entrance. Sarah walked in with Rebecca by her side and immediately felt the stares. Jennifer was there, wearing a cocktail dress that probably cost more than Sarah's car. Her mouth fell open when she saw Sarah. "What are you doing here?" Jennifer hissed, approaching them. "This event is invitation only." "I was invited," Sarah said calmly, "by my lawyer." "Your lawyer?" Jennifer laughed. "Oh, this is rich. What are you going to do, sue us because your feelings got hurt?" "Something like that," Rebecca said smoothly. "Now, if you'll excuse us." They made their way through the crowd. Sarah saw Dr. Wellington Jr. talking with a group of donors, his wife beside him, glittering in diamonds. She saw Marcus Wellington Sr. on the stage, preparing for his acceptance speech, and then she saw them, Marcus and Victoria Wellington, the senior Wellingtons, holding court at a table near the front. And in Victoria, Wellington's arms dressed in an expensive baby outfit, was William. Sarah's breath caught. Her son was there, at a hospital gala, being shown off like a trophy. "Are you ready?" Rebecca asked. "More than ready." Rebecca nodded to someone across the room, and suddenly, hospital security was moving toward their position. But they weren't coming for Sarah. They were escorting a man in a sheriff's uniform, carrying official documents. The room's attention slowly shifted as the sheriff made his way to the Wellington table. The background music seemed to fade. Conversations died down. "Marcus Wellington Sr. and Victoria Wellington," the sheriff said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear. "Yes." Marcus Sr. stood, his expression confused but not yet concerned. He was used to deference, not confrontation. "You're being served with a legal notice. There's a parental rights claim regarding the minor child, William Alexander Wellington." The words hung in the air like a bomb. Victoria Wellington clutched the baby tighter, her face going pale. "I'm sorry. There must be some mistake," Marcus Sr. said, his voice tight. Our adoption was legal and final. That's what the court will determine, the sheriff said. You're required to appear at a hearing on Monday at 9 a.m. All documentation regarding the adoption must be provided. Dr. Wellington Jr. had moved closer, his face a mask of confusion and growing anger. Father, what is this about? I have no idea, Marcus Sr. said, but his eyes were scanning the room, looking for threats, for enemies, for whoever had dared to challenge him. His gaze landed on Sarah. For a moment their eyes met across the room, and she saw the exact second when he recognized her. Not as a nurse, not as an employee, but as a threat. You, he said, his voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. You're the NICU nurse. Every eye in the room turned to Sarah. She felt the weight of their judgment, their confusion, their curiosity. Jennifer was staring at her with open shock. Dr. Wellington Jr. looked like he'd been slapped. Sarah walked forward, Rebecca beside her, until she stood directly in front of the Wellington table. She looked at her son, seeing him clearly for the first time since birth, and felt tears streaming down her face. His name is not William, Sarah said quietly, but in the silence of the ballroom, everyone heard. His name is Gabriel, Gabriel James Harper, and he is my son. The room exploded into whispers and gasps. Victoria Wellington pulled the baby closer, shaking her head frantically. No, that's not possible. His mother died. The clinic told us she died during childbirth. The clinic lied, Rebecca said, stepping forward. They told my client that her son was stillborn. They showed her a falsified death certificate. And then they sold her living, healthy baby to you for $2.5 million. That's insane, Dr. Wellington Jr. said. This is clearly some kind of scam. Father, this is the nurse I told you about, the incompetent one. She's obviously trying to extort money from us. Sarah turned to face him, and when she spoke, her voice was steady and clear. I have genetic testing that proves he is my biological son. I have evidence that the clinic engaged in adoption fraud, and I have 17 months of grief that you and your family can never understand. Genetic testing can be faked, Marcus Sr. said, but there was a crack in his confidence now. We'll fight this. We have the best lawyers in the city. I'm sure you do, Rebecca said. But you don't have the truth, and that's what matters. A woman in an elegant gown stood up from a nearby table. Sarah recognized her as Judge Patricia Brennan, one of the most respected family court judges in the state. Marcus, Judge Brennan said, if what this woman is saying is true, if there's even a possibility that this child was stolen from his mother, then you need to cooperate fully with the investigation. Fighting it will only make you look guilty. Patricia, we're victims here too, Victoria Wellington said, her voice breaking. We thought we were giving a child a home. We love him. We've raised him for over a year. I know, Judge Brennan said, not unkindly. And if that's true, the court will take that into consideration. But the biological mother's rights are paramount. If she was defrauded, if her child was stolen, then no amount of love from adoptive parents supersedes that. Sarah watched as her words sank in around the room. She saw the faces of the wealthy and powerful, realizing that money couldn't buy their way out of this. She saw Jennifer and Dr. Wellington Jr. understanding that the woman they had mocked and dismissed was about to dismantle their entire world. I want my son, Sarah said. I want the time I lost with him. I want the first words I missed, the first smiles, the first everything. You took that from me. The clinic took that from me. And no amount of your money or power is going to change the fact that he is mine. Marcus Sr. was a man used to winning, used to controlling every situation. But standing there in his moment of triumph, being honored as a philanthropist while holding a stolen child, he had nowhere to go. "The hearing is Monday," Rebecca repeated. "We'll see you in court." Sarah and Rebecca left the ballroom, leaving chaos in their wake. Behind them, the gala had dissolved into frantic conversations. Reporters who had been covering the event suddenly had a much bigger story, and the Wellington family was scrambling to contain a situation that was already far beyond their control. In the car, Sarah finally allowed herself to break down. The adrenaline faded, and she sobbed into her hands, all the fear and pain and hope flooding out at once. "You did it," Rebecca said, rubbing her back. "The hard part is over." "The hard part is just beginning," Sarah said. "They're going to fight me with everything they have." "Let them. We have the truth." The weekend was a blur of media attention. The story broke on Saturday morning. Prominent philanthropist family accused of adopting stolen baby. By Saturday evening, it was national news. By Sunday, the clinic where Sarah had given birth had been raided by federal agents, and 3 staff members had been arrested. Other mothers started coming forward, women who had been told their babies died, who had buried empty caskets, who had mourned children that might still be alive. The scandal was enormous, far bigger than anyone had anticipated. Sarah stayed away from her apartment, staying in a safe location that Rebecca had arranged. The media was relentless, trying to find her, trying to get her story. But Rebecca was adamant. They would speak in court, not to cameras. Monday morning arrived. Sarah dressed in a simple navy suit that Rebecca had helped her choose. She looked professional, put together. Nothing like the struggling nurse in worn scrubs that the hospital staff had mocked. The courthouse was packed. Media vans lined the streets. Inside, the Wellington family was already seated with their legal team. 5 lawyers in expensive suits looking ready for battle. Sarah sat with Rebecca at the plaintiff's table, her hands folded, her back straight. She had spent 17 months believing her son was dead. She could handle a few hours in court. Judge Harriet Morrison entered, a stern woman in her 60s known for her no-nonsense approach to family law. Everyone stood, then sat again at her signal. "This is a preliminary hearing," Judge Morrison said, "to determine the immediate custody of the minor child known as William Alexander Wellington and Gabriel James Harper. Ms. Torres, you may present your opening statement." Rebecca stood. "Your Honor, this is a case of the most egregious violation of parental rights I have encountered in my 20-year career. My client, Sarah Harper, gave birth to a healthy baby boy 17 months ago. She was told by the clinic staff that her son had died during delivery. She was shown falsified documents. She mourned her child while he was alive, and being sold to the highest bidder. She presented documents to the court, the genetic testing, the death certificate that had been proven fake, the payment records from the Wellington family to the clinic, testimony from other mothers who had been similarly defrauded. The Wellington family's lead attorney, a man named Richard Ashford, stood to present their case. Your Honor, my clients are also victims. They engaged in what they believe to be a legal adoption process. They have raised this child with love and care for over a year. They have bonded with him. To remove him from the only home he's known would be traumatic. The only home he should have known was with his biological mother, Rebecca countered. A mother who had her child stolen from her through fraud and deception. The testimony went on for hours. Experts testified about genetic testing, about the clinic's fraudulent practices, about parental bonds and child development. The Wellington family tried to paint themselves as innocent victims who had acted in good faith. But the evidence was overwhelming. The clinic's records, once seized by federal agents, showed a clear pattern. They targeted poor, vulnerable women. They fabricated deaths. They sold the babies to wealthy couples who wanted to skip the lengthy legal adoption process. And the smoking gun, an email from Victoria Wellington to the clinic director, expressing concern about the lack of proper documentation and being told not to worry about it. They had known something was wrong. Maybe not the full truth, but enough to know they were skating the edge of legality. And they had chosen to ignore it. At 4:30 p.m., Judge Morrison called a recess. "I'll deliver my ruling tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. Until then, the child will remain in the temporary custody of the Wellington family, but with supervised visitation rights granted to Ms. Harper." Sarah's heart leapt. She would get to see him, to hold him, today. The visitation took place in a small room at the courthouse, with a social worker present. Victoria Wellington brought Gabriel in, and the moment Sarah saw him, she started crying. "Hi, sweet boy," she whispered, kneeling down to his level. Gabriel looked at her with curious eyes. He was walking now, something she had missed. He had more hair, more awareness. 17 months of life that had been stolen from her. "He doesn't know you," Victoria said, her voice breaking. "He knows me. I'm his mother." "You're the woman who raised him," Sarah said, not looking away from Gabriel. "I'm the woman who gave birth to him. Both things can be true." Gabriel toddled toward Sarah, attracted by something in her voice, in her face. He reached out and touched her tears, his little face concerned. "Sad," he said, one of his first words. "No, baby," Sarah said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Happy. Mama is so happy." The visit lasted an hour, the longest and shortest hour of Sarah's life. When it ended, Victoria Wellington picked up Gabriel, and Sarah saw the fear in the other woman's eyes, the fear of losing a child she loved, even if that child had never been truly hers. "I know you love him," Sarah said quietly. "But he's my son, and what was done to both of us was wrong." Victoria didn't respond, just carried Gabriel away. But Sarah saw her shoulders shaking with sobs. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Tomorrow would determine everything. She thought about the people at the hospital who had mocked her, who had treated her as less than, who had never bothered to see her as a full human being, with her own pain and her own story. She thought about Jennifer's words, "You're too poor to be here." She thought about Dr. Wellington Jr.'s condescension, his assumption that poverty meant incompetence. She thought about all of it, and she felt a burning determination. Win or lose tomorrow, she had proven that she mattered, that her son mattered, that money and power didn't erase truth. Tuesday morning, the courtroom was even more packed than before. Judge Morrison entered holding a thick folder of documents. "I've reviewed all the evidence presented," she said, her voice grave, "and I've made my decision." The room held its collective breath. "The genetic testing is conclusive. Gabriel James Harper is the biological son of Sarah Harper. The death certificate presented to Ms. Harper was fraudulent. The adoption process engaged in by the Wellington family was based on documents that were, at best, inadequate, and at worst, knowingly falsified." Marcus Wellington Sr. closed his eyes. Victoria Wellington gripped her husband's hand so hard her knuckles turned white. "However," Judge Morrison continued, "I also recognize that the child has been in the Wellington family's care for 17 months. That bond, while not superseding biological parental rights, is real and must be considered." Sarah's heart was pounding so hard she thought she might pass out. "My ruling is as follows. Full legal and physical custody is awarded to Sarah Harper, effective immediately." The courtroom erupted. Victoria Wellington let out a sound of pure anguish. Marcus Sr. stood, his face red with fury. "Your Honor, you can't—" "I can, and I have," Judge Morrison said firmly. "However, I am also ordering a transition plan. Ms. Harper and the Wellington family will engage in supervised transitions over the next 30 days, with a child psychologist present, to help Gabriel adjust to his new primary home. The Wellingtons will be granted visitation rights, pending further hearings." "Visitation rights?" Victoria Wellington stood, tears streaming down her face. "He's my son." "He is Sarah Harper's son," Judge Morrison said, not unkindly but firmly. "He was stolen from her. And while I understand your pain, Mrs. Wellington, you are not the victim in this courtroom." Rebecca squeezed Sarah's hand under the table. "You did it," she whispered. "He's coming home." Sarah was crying so hard she couldn't speak. 17 months of grief, of loss, of mourning came pouring out. But this time they were tears of joy. The transition period was difficult for everyone. Gabriel was confused by the changes, crying for Victoria at night, not understanding why his world had shifted. But Sarah was patient, consistent, loving. And slowly, day by day, Gabriel began to bond with her. The media coverage was relentless, but it had shifted. Sarah was no longer just the poor nurse. She was the mother who never gave up, the woman who exposed a massive adoption fraud ring, the hero who brought justice to dozens of families. The clinic was shut down. The directors faced federal charges. And the Wellington family. They hired crisis management teams, tried to spin the story, but the damage was done. Marcus Wellington Sr. resigned from multiple charity boards. The hospital renamed the Wellington Wing. Dr. Wellington Jr. took a leave of absence. And Sarah. She went back to work at Manhattan Presbyterian Hospital, but not as a bedside nurse. The publicity around her case had revealed her backstory. She had been in medical school before Gabriel's birth, had dropped out due to circumstances beyond her control. The hospital, desperate to repair its public image, and genuinely impressed by her clinical skills, offered her a scholarship to complete her degree. On her first day back, she walked through the NICU in street clothes, there to pick up some paperwork before starting her medical school re-enrollment. Jennifer was there, her eyes widening when she saw Sarah. "Hi, Jennifer," Sarah said calmly. I didn't know." Jennifer stammered. "About your son. About what happened to you." "You didn't ask," Sarah said. "You saw my worn scrubs and broken shoes, and decided you knew everything about me. You never bothered to see me as a person." "I'm sorry," Jennifer said, and she sounded like she meant it. "I know," Sarah said. "But sorry doesn't give me back 17 months with my son. Sorry doesn't change the fact that you and others like you made my life harder during the worst time of my existence." She walked past Jennifer, her head high, leaving the other woman standing in the NICU, where she had once dismissed Sarah as too poor to belong. 5 years later, Sarah walked across the stage at her medical school graduation. She was Dr. Sarah Harper now, specializing in neonatology. In the audience, Gabriel sat with Rebecca, who had become not just a lawyer but a friend. He was 6 years old, happy, thriving, with no memory of the chaos of his early years. The Wellingtons had visitation with him once a month. It had been hard navigating that relationship, but Sarah had chosen grace over bitterness. Victoria Wellington, for all her faults, did love Gabriel, and Sarah could give him the gift of knowing people who cared about him, even if the circumstances of their relationship were complicated. But Gabriel knew who his mother was. There was never any confusion about that. After the ceremony, Sarah picked Gabriel up and spun him around, both of them laughing. "I'm so proud of you, Mama," Gabriel said. "I'm proud of us, baby. We did this together." That night, after Gabriel was asleep, Sarah sat in her small but comfortable apartment and thought about the journey that had brought her here. From the devastating lie that her son had died, to the grinding poverty and humiliation at the hospital, to the moment she discovered the truth, to the fight to get him back, to now, she thought about Jennifer's words, "You're too poor to be here." She thought about how wrong those words had been, not because Sarah had stopped being poor, though her circumstances had improved, but because worth was never about money. It was never about designer scrubs or perfect shoes or coming from the right background. It was about truth, about love, about fighting for what mattered, even when the entire world seemed stacked against you. Sarah picked up her phone and looked at her favorite photo. Gabriel at his 6th birthday party, surrounded by friends, his smile bright and genuine. A child who had been stolen, who had been mourned, who had been lost and found. Her son. Her miracle. Her proof that sometimes the poor single nurse with the broken shoes is exactly the hero the story needs. And anyone who judged her by her appearance instead of her character had learned a very expensive lesson about the cost of cruelty. The end.